Right, the final installment then in this 4-part video series I've been making over the course of the international break, where I've gone through the best players at each price point by position so far this season. And in this episode, of course, we're talking the forwards. So similar to how I started the midfielders video, I'm going to go through the top 5 forwards in the Premier League for expected goal involvements. I thought, this is a good stat to look at, right? Because expected goal involvements is basically saying how, the attacking output, essentially, of these players. You got Nicholas Jackson, Haaland, Havertz, Solanke and Watkins as your top 5 there. Obviously, Haaland has gotten off to a ridiculous start this season. 10 goals in 7 starts. By far and away, obviously, the best performer. The question I have about Haaland, I've got him in my team because I think most weeks he's the best captain. And for that reason, I've gone for him. But you do have to ask the question, I guess. I know he's got 10 returns in 7 starts, right? But is he worth that 15.4 million? I guess that's the question that you have to ask yourself by buying him. I think most people have decided on him now. They've either got him on their team or they haven't. Yeah, crazy season to start off. Well, crazy way to start the season for him. 0.96 expected returns per 90, expected goal involvements per 90. That's the best of any player in the Premier League so far this season. Nicholas Jackson, 7.9 million he is now. 7 starts, 4 goals, 3 assists. So that's 7 attacking returns from 7 starts, from 5.1 expected goal involvements. Doesn't necessarily play 90 minutes every game. 0.89 expected returns per 90. So pretty damn respectable numbers, I would suggest. Kai Havertz, 4 goals, 1 assist, 4.5 expected goal involvements, 0.64 expected returns per 90. Dominic Solanke, one of the few players on this list actually who has underperformed his stats so far. So he's got 2 goals, 1 assist from 4 XGI so far, 0.8 expected returns per 90. And Ollie Watkins there in number 5, 7 starts, 4 goals, 2 assists, 3.9 expected returns, and then 0.66 per 90. Headlines for this, obviously Haaland, number 1 in the league, no doubt about it. Nicholas Jackson looking really strong, putting up some really good numbers. And I'd say Solanke too. Obviously had a bit of period of time where he was injured. When he has played for Spurs, he's looked really good. I think he proves to be good value for 7.6 million. Watkins, you know what you're getting with Watkins, right? He's probably going to start every game and just be solid across the season. But I would question, solid across the season for 9 million. Is that worth it? Could you potentially pick someone cheaper that's putting up similar kind of output? 6 attacking returns from 7 starts is obviously very good, but Nicholas Jackson has got 7. Solanke's expected goal involvements are better, and he's played 2 less games, for example. So obviously I like Ollie Watkins, but you'd have to ask the question, is he a little bit too expensive? And considering as well, he's not on penalties. So yeah, those are the top 5 forwards, regardless of price, for expected goal involvements. All right, so going down the price charts or price points now, and one thing I would say with forwards is there are just less of them. There are less forwards that are actually pickable in this game and ones you'd actually want to talk about than there are midfielders and defenders. So, if this video is a little bit shorter and there are less players to go through, don't be surprised. Most teams only play with 1 forward. So yeah, ultimately there's only going to be like 20 that are actually worth talking about in total. So when you look at the premium price point, I've gone for 7 million plus. So you got Haaland, Watkins, Havertz, Isak, Jackson, Solanke, and Mateta. I've kind of already spoken through 5 of these. Isak, all the promise was there with him at the start of the season, wasn't it? For the numbers he put up last year, he was 8.5 million at the time. And you were thinking, well, certainly I was thinking, wow, that's such a good price for a player that performed at the level that he did last season. But it just hasn't worked out so far this season. Obviously got an injury now as well, broken his toe. You'd have to ask, is he going to be back for game week 8 as well? 1 goal, 1 assist from the 5 start, 0.38 expected returns per 90. Not all that impressive. And the only other player worth considering, I guess, at this price point is Mateta. 2 goals from 6 starts, 0.39 expected returns per 90 for him. But, when you compare Isak and Mateta to the rest of the players at this price point, they are like half as productive in terms of returns per 90, basically. So I think that kind of discounts them from being picked, and you should really focus on those other 5 players. Right, so as I did in my midfielders and defenders video, in addition to looking at historical data this season, I thought it would also be worth just looking at an expected points projection. This is courtesy of Fantasy Football Hub. And these are the rankings, basically, of the top forwards at this price point. Interestingly, I mean, it's no surprise, I guess, to see Haaland number 1, Havertz number 2, Solanke, Watkins, you know. It was interesting for me, at least, to see Isak was above Nicholas Jackson. I mean, we go back to the stats they put up this season. Jackson, like, just absolutely destroys Isak in terms of stats this season. But I think the Fantasy Football Hub points model, it uses more historical data than just this season's. And obviously, Isak outperformed Jackson last season. And I would say it does appear that the Newcastle fixtures, particularly from game weeks 10 onwards, do look a little bit better than Chelsea. So that's probably factored into those expected points. But yeah, I'm not going to go into any more detail about it. It's quite clear what Fantasy Football Hub and their predicted points model think. This is how they have ranked the premium forwards in the game for expected points. All right, so next I've gone for sort of mid-price forwards. And for me, there are probably 4 pickable options at this price point. Matheus Cunha of Wolves, John Duran of Aston Villa, who hasn't started a game in the Premier League yet, but still has 4 goals. Chris Wood, 4 goals from 7 starts. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin, according to DCL there, 2 goals, 1 assist from 7 starts. I think most people will have a forward of this price point, or maybe the cheaper one, in their team. Almost definitely, right? And it's about deciding who is the best one. To provide a bit of personal opinion, I think it's Chris Wood. In this season, he's got 4 goals from 7 starts. Last season, if I remember correctly, he started 20 games and got 14 goals. So if you add that up, 14 goals plus 4, 18, and 20 plus 7, 27. So 18 goals from his last 27 starts in the Premier League. I think that's a pretty strong showing for a 6.2 million forward. And he's proven this season he took a penalty when Morgan Gibbs-White was on the pitch. So he is the Nottingham Forest #1 choice penalty taker. The underlying numbers are not so good, but he kind of seems to be a player that can outperform his underlying data. And there are very few players in the Premier League that do that. Namely, you've got players like Heung-min Son, who historically do that, and Jarrod Bowen as well, to name a couple. So yeah, I think Chris Wood's playing really well, and he's a good option. Ultimately, maybe Duran is the one because he's a bit of a minutes risk. I would say all 4 of these players are genuinely pickable, and it's kind of up to you as to who you think looks the best on your eye, maybe, or has the best upcoming fixtures. And speaking of the best upcoming fixtures and projected points, etc., Chris Wood comes out on top, 29 expected points according to Fantasy Football Hub over the next 5 games. And I don't actually think, I just have to go in a bit closer to read them. Yeah, 11 and 12, they get tough. But the next 3 fixtures for Forest look pretty good. And I would say, to be fair, it's the same for Wolves, but in the inverse, they got Man City in game week 8, and then the fixtures get a bit more tolerable. But yeah, like I said, apart from probably Duran, who you can't back necessarily to be starting, and it's, for me, I find it really hard to pick a player in FPL that isn't starting. You know, you can't really pick a bench option. He has just signed a new contract with Villa, but he's just not getting in the 11 at the moment. So I think Wood, Cunha and Calvert-Lewin are probably the 3. And yeah, maybe use this expected points data in numbers you see on this screen to help you pick. And just to round off the video, and indeed the series, we've got the budget forward. So below sort of 5.5 million, I've got to be honest, I didn't really see anyone that was worth actually picking or talking about. If you've spotted someone, identified someone yourself, let me know in the comments. But for me, when I looked below sort of 5.5 million, there really wasn't anyone I fancied. Evan Nilsson of Bournemouth, gotten off to, well, a pretty poor start with just the single goal. I believe he's missed a penalty as well. But 3 XGI he's put up, you know, promises that, I guess he's shown promise that he can do well, but so far has not necessarily taken his chances. Nketiah seems to be a regular starter for Crystal Palace, but hasn't netted yet. Danny Welbeck appears to be in pretty good form, and he seems to be starting every game at the moment for Brighton. 7 starts, 4 goals, 1 assist. He is actually, by Raul Jimenez, who doesn't beat him for... So Welbeck is basically the best striker at this price point for expected goal involvements. And then Raul Jimenez is second best, but has only started 4 games compared to Welbeck's 7. He's probably the other one I wanted to talk about. 4 starts, 3 goals, 1 assist, 0.81 expected returns per 90 he's put up so far. Comparing him, if we are on the right screen... Yeah, comparing him to some of the top forwards in the game, 0.81 expected returns per 90. While comparing him to some of the premiums, it's better than Watkins, better than Havertz, better than Solanke even. And, you know, this is a 5.5 million forward playing for Fulham. So just something to bear in mind there. And I believe he's on penalties as well. So, yeah, he could well be a good option. Delap has been in good form recently, but the way that he has just I mean, he's nearly quadrupled his expected goal involvements with goals. I would suggest that his level of returns aren't necessarily sustainable. That's just my opinion, though. You might disagree. Looking at the other players, Vardy, I just don't think you can pick Jamie Vardy in this game. I think last season, I watched him a few times in the Championship because I got a season ticket at Bristol City. He just didn't look like the Jamie Vardy of old. He's netted a couple of times in the Premier League this season, yes, but I just don't think he's an option really this season. Who else we got? João Pedro, injured at the moment. And I would also question with Jorginho Ruta playing so well for Brighton, kind of in his place. I don't think it's going to be that easy for João Pedro to get back into the team. And then Strand Larsen of Wolves as well, quietly putting up some decent numbers, but I don't think they're quite good enough for him to be a consideration on this list. For me, I would say my two favourite players around this price point, I give it to Danny Welbeck and Raul Jimenez. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. Like I said at the start, this is a bit shorter than the other videos I've made, purely because there's just less forwards in the league than there are other positions. You know, most teams start with 4 defenders. So naturally, you know, you think about it, there's probably 80 defenders that are starting quite regularly. Same with the midfielders. But whereas strikers, you know, most teams play 1, maybe 2. So there's a real shortage of actual players you can talk about. So hence the shorter video. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this theme of videos to keep you ticking along during the international break. You know, I thought it'd be interesting. We're 7 game weeks into the season now. That's long enough where you've got, you know, a reasonable sample size of data to start looking at. And yeah, we've also looked at some projections going forward as well. So if you enjoyed that video and found it useful, like I said, please leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of the opinions I mentioned there. I always say this. I'm always open to people having different opinions to me. Just be polite about it. That's all I ask in the comments. And if you're new around here and haven't already and want to see more content from me, make sure to subscribe to the Golden Goal channel. The button should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in my next video, which will be focused on Game Week 8.